Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Say What podcast. This episode will be part of a three-part mini-series that will expand on our last ESG podcast, where we discussed how ESG can affect a business. Here with me today, I have Jeff Dyra, a strategic energy advisor with Nania Energy. Thank you for being here with me today, Jeff.
Thank you for having me again, Jill.
Last time we met, you explained how ESG can affect businesses. Today, we will be taking a little more of a deeper dive into what we would consider scope one. Is that correct?
We sure are. So after a company makes a commitment to their ESG goal, the next step is to understand what actions a business can take to meet the different scope requirements that are required by ESG mandates. There are three different categories, or better known as scopes, that classify different types of emissions from both direct and indirect sources. Today, I wanted to share what scope one is and what actions an organization can take to meet their scope one ESG pledge. It's important to understand each scope to ensure you meet any net zero or carbon neutral goals. Because at the end of the day, you cannot manage what you cannot measure.
So let's start to get into the weeds here. So what are scope one emissions?
Scope one emissions include direct emissions from operations the business or organization directly own. Scope one emissions are usually the easiest to manage because the organizations have direct control over the source of the emissions and they are on site.
Would you be able to share some examples of what would be considered scope one emissions?
A couple of examples for our listeners to visualize are fuel combustion emissions that may come from boilers or machinery that is used in your manufacturing process, leaks in refrigerant lines that release gas, and emissions that burn fuel from vehicles your business owns. All of these lead to increased greenhouse gas emissions and may lead to a business not achieving a company's goal or the company's customers' ESG guidelines. The good news is that you have the power to directly change these quickly and in an affordable way. The main issue we find is that companies do not know where to start, and determining where to start can be time consuming, but there are solutions out there for you.
Thank you for sharing those examples. I can see how those could be an issue for companies. So if a company has one or more of those examples, what actions can their organization take to meet their scope one ESG pledge?
Companies can contact their local utility company. Many of them offer a free assessment and solutions to fix outdated mechanical parts or ideas to move closer to a scope one goal. To take a more in-depth look into the measuring of your emissions and set up a plan to continue to meet your scope one goals, you can contact our office and a strategic advisor will discuss what options may be available in your local area.
I think it's safe to say I learned something new today, and so did our listeners. Thank you, Jeff, for being here with me today as part of our three-part mini-series. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Stay tuned for our next Say What podcast, where we will take a deeper dive into scope two emissions.